All right. So the segment that set the podcasting universe aflame, the lineup time machine is back, coming into you remotely from the best Western in Lemoore, California. Pat, how are you doing in your room?
I'm fantastic, Dave. How are you, my friend?
I'm okay. So we're all here, all the surfers, the skeleton staff. We're in separate rooms. We're drinking by ourselves, coffee or otherwise. It's kind of like the saddest college dorm ever because we can't go outside and see each other.
Yeah, I was commenting that if I've ever thought of doing something a little bit sketchy, I know what prison's like, and I would be no good at it. So I am on this clean, straight and narrow. I'm telling you that now. Not that you were ever worried about me, but this experience has told me it's been almost 24 hours, and yeah, I'm not doing so good.
I'm on the other side. I miss my kids a ton.
Yes.
And I miss being outside. But as far as like being worried about being put in solitary confinement, I'm okay. Like I mean, and I'd say it's like, I think I just need to be like really frustrated with everyone in my life. And then I'm like, I'll go into solitary and I'll feel good for a little bit. I'm sure if I get to day 3, I'd lose my mind. So.
Yeah, I did cheat a little bit this morning, I should say. I woke up at about 5 and I went for a walk. I did like a mile walk around the place. Yeah, that really got me thinking that if I can't even do this, I got real problems.
All right. So to recap, the time machine is you and I speculating on how the world title determination would have gone down in previous years with the forthcoming WSL Finals format. So last time we ran through the theoretical 2010 contenders at Salina Cruz. And I think we both determined that Steph Gilmore still probably would have won her title in the new format at Salina Cruz. And that Kelly, he probably still would have won his 10th title, but that there was maybe a sliding doors reality in which Mick Fanning turned on in right-hand points and claimed an extra one. And then if that happens, who knows where we would be in 2020, 10 years later.
Yep, that's exactly right. And I remember a lot of the conversation was based also on what day we chose, right? Like if it was a, bigger day, smaller day, whatever. And I think that there's always going to be these variables, which actually makes it so much more interesting. So there's all these different layers, I should say, which makes it really exciting.
Totally. So for today's time machine, we're taking the year-end rankings from 2014, and we're running the final 5 men and women through the WSL Finals format to speculate who would come out on top. And we're asking the question, what might have happened if the WSL Finals format was in place back in 2014? So same disclaimer as last time. We're obviously aware that all the year-end rankings don't take into account future schedules, formats, judging criterias, mid-season cuts, etc. But we're operating the time machine based off of how those years finished. So first thing first, as you rightly pointed out, Pat, the venue obviously plays a huge role in the final event. But we haven't announced where the venue is going to be for 2021. So you and I last time picked 4 venues, excuse me.
Very scientific, by the way.
It's good. This is how I do things with my kids. And those were Lakey Peak, Macaronis, Trestles, and Salina Cruz. And Salina Cruz got selected. So I asked you for the 4th sub in, which you gave me Tavarua. So we have those. We have those as scientifically as possible. And what has traveled with me to Lemoore, which is probably why I'm doing so well by myself in my room, is Joel Parkinson's original world title cup, which is what we use for all major decisions at the WSL. So these are going in the cup. We know how he's not watching these because he probably would be like, hey, dude.
I need that.
Yeah, where'd that come from? Okay.
I love that you were driving with that all the way up here. And was that in the passenger seat? Where did you didn't put it in the trunk, did you?
I put it on the steering wheel. This is like my guiding light for my career and personal life is this cup.
Of course it is.
All right. So I'm not looking. Here we go.
Ooh.
Macaronis. All right. Thank you.
This is a heater. This is
steered us in the right direction once again. Joel's never getting this back.
Wow. Okay. I just looked at the draw and it's wow.
Yes. So I thought you pointed out something really good when we played last time, which is the conditions at the venue also impact our guesses. So as you are the king of conditions and calls, SVP of tours and competitions, we have the venue, it's Macaroni's. Can you give us a conditions call for our WSL finals game here?
Yeah, so here's what I'd like to do. Let me just think about that for a second, because Macaroni's is known as probably the most rippable wave in the planet. It has a steep takeoff barrel that goes for a while, and then it's almost as much of a wave pool. Probably has been looked at for building wave pools around the world, is the way the wave comes in the reef, and it's as identical of a wave as you can get, back to back to back. I think we've long talked about having events at Macaroni's and how that would be the best sort of platform, or and so there's a couple different moods out there, and I'll use sort of from the biggest to the smallest. The biggest is where it almost is white watering out the back, and you see those ones of people getting those real late sort of ledgy takeoffs and pulling into the barrel, and those ones. And then what happens subsequently is it actually pulls off the reef a little bit and ends up maybe not as rippable. I would like to think we'd get a day a little bit less than that, because ultimately where I think this can go is that it needs to be that barrel section out the back, which is critical for your takeoff, your positioning, but then opens up, 4 to 5 major maneuvers with an air. And I think that's what we're looking at. So I'm probably saying 4 to 6 foot, 4 to 5 foot in that range. And yeah, and the great thing is, at least my experience at Macaroni's, it's not so tidal as some of the other places we've looked at in the past. So I think it sort of stays good through most tides. So I think we get a full good day out there.
That's a really good point. So the contenders at the end of 2014, in reverse order for the women, Malia Manuel, Sally Fitzgibbons, Carissa Moore, Tyler Wright, and Stephanie Gilmore. And then for the men, Michelle Perez, Kelly Slater, John Florence, Mick Fanning, and Gabriel Medina. Now, I think it's important to call out the sixth surfer on each side and have a quick conversation on whether you think they would have been deadly in this format or not. So the sixth surfer on the women's side was none other than Lakey Peterson, and then the sixth surfer on the men's side was Joel Parkinson. Any initial thoughts? Obviously, they wouldn't have been in the event, but do you think that if they had been in the event, they would have shaken things up?
Well, certainly Bianca. Now that we know that it's a left. You look at the women's draw, and there are no goofy foots. So I think just in point of difference, that would be interesting. But no, I think ultimately this is the right thing. And again, cutting it at 5 is the right idea. It's as we do this, we are looking into the past at a format that wasn't existing. So in the beginning of the year that you need to make the top 5. So it makes it sort of that's your goal. But I do think, again, there's 2 regular foots that didn't make the cut for this particular exercise. It doesn't really matter. There's only one. I mean, if you look at, and this is pretty interesting just across the board, there's only one goofy foot in the 10 names that that we're going to have surfing. That could either be a huge advantage for that one goofy foot, or it could go the exact opposite way. But I do think it's interesting to note, it's an interesting point to note that, there's only, and that one goofy foot happens to be the number 1 seed on the men's side. So, I was going to say, I think that's a really good point. And especially since we've pulled Macaroni's, it's particularly interesting. So let's get into it. So match 1 is going to be the 2014 versions of Malia Manuel and Sally Fitzgibbons. So Pat, who do you think takes out match 1 on our WSL finals? So I will go, I think if this is on their forehand, I think it's maybe a little bit, I think Malia has a better chance. I think Sally's done real well at Tavarua. I'm going to point to her backhand as being really, really strong. So I think she gets that. Certainly on a right point, I think it would probably be, it's more of a 50-50 battle, but I think Sally gets the upper nod here.
Yeah, I went the same. I went with Sally on match 1 at Macaroni's. I will say, though, that Malia is so good in reef breaks. I think a function of her growing up on Kauai. She's with O'Neill, she's riding Mayhems. She just kind of had like kind of inconsistent years at the start of her career where she'd finish like very high and then the next year she wouldn't finish as high. And some of that was injury related and some of it was otherwise. And Sally was still riding really high as like one of the marquee athletes at Roxy and Red Bull, and she was riding Firewires. And like you, I think her performances at places like Tavarua would really lend itself well to Macaroni. So I gave that one to her too.
Yeah, I think really just on that, just one thing I would say too is what we're looking for between these surfers is something that gives them either a place to stand out. And that's why I brought up Goofy Foot to Regular Foot. And I think it's important as we look through these, the piece that I see for Sally, but also to think across the board is how can she stand out? I think she can stand out in that particular matchup by getting barreled, which I think she's actually a lot better on her backhand than a lot of the other the girls in the barrel. And so I think that's just an interesting point to note as we kind of go further down the line.
Totally agree. So match 2, which is the first match on the men's side, is Michelle Perez, again, 2014 version of Michelle Perez, against the 2014 version of Kelly Slater. Who do you got?
Michelle won 2 events that year. I think he won in Margaret River and he won in Rio. Kelly got that amazing tube, I think, that year in Rio. Look, it's always hard to vote against Kelly. But certainly this wave is a sort of an equaling point. I may take Michelle here. This is the highest ranking Michelle has ever had, I think. And I think that he was really, really surfing well. And, I think that he might see this as a real big opportunity to kind of make his way through the draw a little bit.
Interesting. So I'm gonna lean into the opportunity point there, but I'm gonna go with Kelly. And the reason I'm going with Kelly, because I think Michelle's backhand unquestionably lethal. I think he had a great year in 2014. This was the year that Kelly parted ways with Quicksilver. He was with them for 2 decades or something like that. In 2010, he won the title. Unless he was in the WSL finals, debating. 2011, he won the title twice, as it ended up being. In 2012 and 2013, he finished runner-up. In 2014, he parts ways with Quicksilver. So I'm looking at his finals berth in 2014 at Macaroni's is like kind of the Tom Brady fuck you year, where he's like, I've got a lot to prove. Like, I'm not going to slip away from the title. He knows that wave so well. He's riding Channel Islands. He doesn't have a sticker on the nose of his board. Like, I'm going to give this one to Kelly because I think he's just going to be like out for blood and thinking that this is my chance to get another title. So I'm going to give this one to Kelly. So we've disagreed.
That's good.
That's good.
And I kind of went for. Yeah, I took all of those things that you just sent into account, but I actually went the opposite way. Just on Michelle was surging and Kelly was maybe lazy.
Yeah, well, and it's also a fair point, right? Because if you look at Kelly's trajectory after that year, right? Finished 4th in 2014 and then 9th, 7th, and then he was hurt for a couple of years. Like he really hasn't been close to the title since 2013, you know? So it's a totally fair point. Okay. So match 3 is going to be Carissa Moore coming up against winner of match 1, Sally Fitzgibbons. Who do you got?
So slightly controversial again. I'm going to take Sally for all the reasons that I said against Malia. Again, I think Sally's strong point is her backhand on those reefs. And I think Carissa has done a lot of work on those waves, but I think post 2014, if that happens today, I think I would say Carissa. I know Carissa works a lot at that particular type of a wave because she's felt that she could improve in those waves. I think if it were 2014, I would go with Sally.
Yeah, geez, that's a really good, you've swayed me on this because I initially had Carissa thinking that she had 3 wins that year, right? Margaret River, Bells Beach, and Maui. But this was also the year that Sally had the big win in Fiji. and she also won in Rio. Like she got second at Trestles. Like she was just on fire. Second in Cascais. Yeah, I'm with you. I think you're totally right on the read that maybe after 2014, Carissa's backhand and reef breaks like really takes a quantum leap. But in 2014, I'm going to give it to Sally as well.
Yeah, and I think also the wins that Carissa had, you said it was Bells, it was Maui, and it was where else?
Oh, Carissa, Bells, Margaret River, and Maui.
Going right.
Yeah.
Is my point. And so I don't think that that's necessarily kryptonite for Carissa, but I certainly think she is much stronger on her forehand than her backhand. And I think that's her strong point.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Okay. Match 4, John Florence up against, for you, Michelle Perez. So I'll let you answer yours first. And then for me, Kelly Slater. So who do you got, John or Michelle?
I just think, and this is where I think the beauty of it is, I think this is, if John gets, he's made that top 5, I think, his ability is in these type of waves is so high that I think John gets a win, whether it's over Michelle or over Kelly even at that point. Just, I think this is when he's starting to learn. And I would say, yeah, this is the beginning of that sort of his ascension. And I think he gets a win in either of those.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. So this was the year that he won France and he beat Jaddy out at France on a day that like no one else was surfing on the beach. Like no one wanted a piece of it. Yeah, that was nuts. And he got third.
He got third in Portugal.
He got third in Tahiti. Who did he? Yep. Did he lose to Kelly in Tahiti? Was that
was that perfect heat? That was the one that got 10s and 9s and across the board. So you could make an argument that Kelly still had him then. You could say, or this is payback. That was that heat where, I think Kelly had either 2 10s or, it was
a psycho heat. Yeah.
It was probably the best, arguably the best heat in professional surfing, right? That was
absolutely up there. But that's okay. But if I'm on my current trajectory of Kelly, he's got something to prove. He's in with a chance. He has so much experience at macaronis. His backhand is deadly. And I think somewhere in kind of his unprecedented psychology, he's realizing this may be my last chance to stave off John, and I've got the upper hand on him from beating him in Tahiti. As you pointed out, it could be like a revenge thing for John, and John might really lift to the occasion. I'm going to give it to Kelly. I want to see him mow through one more and stave off John one more time before John kind of basically ascends, into sort of the title conversation in perpetuity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah, I like it. Okay, so we're going to take a quick break to get a word in from our sponsors, and when we come back, it will be the thrilling conclusion to this week's Time Machine. So we're back for match 5. We have Tyler Wright up against, for both of us in our WSL Finals format, Sally Fitzgibbons. Who do you got?
Did you give it to Sally too?
I did. Yeah, I was with you. You sold me. I think if I had answered first, I'd be on Carissa, but I was like, you know what, Pat, he knows what he's talking about. I'm going to go with Sally on this.
I think we should flip our order because I think you should start and then I'll.
That's right.
So we've got Tyler and Sally.
Tyler and Sally. Now this is a pre back-to-back world title Tyler Wright because this is 2014.
Yes. Yeah, man, this is a really good one. My initial reaction, just straight up, is Tyler gets the win because I think I think Tyler's great on her forehand. I look at her in these type of waves, and I think it feels pretty natural for her to ride like these type of waves. But I think it's a tight battle. Switching the order. How do you feel?
Oh yeah, geez, I don't know. Like it's funny, right? Because her backhand is so strong, but I kind of give it to Sally in 2014 because I don't think I think her backhand is really strong as well, and she's a sharper competitor. And Tyler hadn't quite hit her stride on, I'm going to be a back-to-back world title contender. Like, she finished runner-up 2013, 2014, then fell to fifth in 2015, and then won back-to-back world titles 2016, 2017. And I remember a distinct switch went on when she's like, okay, I've decided I'm going to start winning. I think in 2014 it wasn't quite there yet. And I kind of like the idea of Sally using this opportunity to be like, yeah, I'm going to get closer to the cup on this one. So I'm going to give it to Sally on this one.
I was kind of leaning the same place. In these situations too, it's a little bit, I look at the higher seed is it's like, what would someone have to do to knock them off? So I think initially I start with the higher seed as being the one that's going to get the win. But in this particular situation, I do think that Sally's backhand is her strong point. Like, if the tour looked like, Uluwatu and a lot of these great Tavaruas, a bunch of these lefts, I think the tour changes where she becomes the highest seed, right? And so I think I'm going to go the same way and say that Sally gets through that and is into the grand final.
Okay. So match 6 on the guys' side is Mick Fanning versus, for me, Kelly Slater, but for you, John Florence. 2014 versions. Who do you got?
Yeah, I'm going to use my same analogy of just saying, hey, Mick is the seed. So why would it be someone, why would it be one of the other two? I just think the other two, certainly on their backhand, have a little bit more of that X factor where, John can go above the lip and do something that sort of shatters the scale. I think the scale comes down radically when he comes in the water because you don't know, he might do something that no one's ever seen. And where Kelly is a little bit like that too. He just has that freakish nature. Mick has that as well, but it's a little bit more controlled. So I think, in this scenario, I say John gets the win. And I think to do that though, he has to throw a lot of stuff he's got to do something spectacular to get through that heat.
Yeah, and it's one of those things too, Mick Fanning's such an interesting lightning rod for opinion, throughout his entire career, right? And I think for a long time, he was almost unfairly pigeonholed as just a forehand guy, but he has such a good backhand, and I know he worked really hard on that too, and he's won out at places like Tahiti and stuff like that. So he's definitely lethal, and in 2014, he was out of control lethal. He won at Bells, he won at J-Bay, he won in Peniche. He was just 3 wins in a year is pretty radical, but he also had, 2 13ths and 2 25ths. I think for me, since I've got Kelly in this match on my sheet, I'm going to keep giving it to Kelly. I do think Kelly's backhand, particularly in 2014, compared to Mick's and his experience out at Macaroni's, is just so deadly. I think he's one of those guys that's just going to find those sneaky ledge barrels and just turn it into a real crazy combination of maneuvers. I think he's going to have a little bit of an edge in terms of throwing the fins out the back or doing airs on his backhand over Mick. And again, I think he's just going to kind of smell blood in a format like this at Macaroni's, and I think he's gonna give it to Mick. And also, I gave it to Mick a little bit last time at Salina Cruz, so I'm going to pay back Kelly on this one. So I give it to Kelly. All right, so we're down to the finals. The women's finals for the Time Machine 2014 at Macaroni's features none other than Stephanie Gilmore up against Sally Fitzgibbons for both of us. So it's best 2 out of 3. Who do you have taking home the world title in our hypothetical here? And what is the heat makeup? Yeah, how's it go?
So
mind you, so the other important thing to note is that Sally at this point would have surfed 3 times already to get to Steph.
Yeah. So I think that plays a huge part in it, Dave. Because I certainly I see Sally winning at least 1, if not 2 of these. I could argue that she wins because I think, again, going on the backhand conversation, that's her strong point. I think that's where Stephanie has the most to prove. That being said, Sally has surfed, this will be her 4th heat Is that right? 1, 2, 3. This will be her fourth heat, just her first one of the final. I think she gets burnt out, potentially. Sally's a pretty fit character. I certainly don't think it's anyone just runs the gamut. I think Stephanie probably gets the first one because I think there's a little bit of fatigue. Sally finds her way back in round 2, but then ultimately Stephanie gets the win. And I think it's based more on just the amount of heats. Will be 7 heats? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Got to be 7 heats that Sally has to surf in. You talk to anyone, and I think this is a funny one for people who don't compete. A 30-minute heat feels like a 2-hour surf. Just the adrenaline and the situation, you're constantly thinking every inch is a mile in a heat. Positioning is so important. Everything is working at overtime. It sounds funny. It's like 7 heats. Well, you don't surf 7 heats typically in most, a big day, the way the current format is, you surf maybe 2 or 3 heats a day. This is 7 heats a day for her to win in this thing. I think fatigue takes over and Stephanie gets to win.
Yeah, and it's kind of similar to Mick in that Steph is another one that's been pigeonholed as like over the course of her career is like, can't win on her backhand, even though she has, she's won it like in Peru and she's won at Taranaki and like other places like that. I do think that that's something Steph is cognizant of as well, and she works very hard to develop her backhand. I do think that the venue plays such a role here. I think the fitness thing's important. I think out of anyone probably on the men's or women's side, Sally's maybe the fittest person in terms of endurance. She's an absolute machine. So I think that plays less of an issue for her than it would pretty much anyone else in this format. I would almost say that I'm going to give it to Sally, with Sally winning the first heat, Steph winning the second heat, and then Sally coming back and winning the third heat and taking her first world title. I do think the venue plays a huge role in that. Like, I honestly, even on the backhand, if it were at somewhere like Cloudbreak and like solid, like 8 to 10 foot Cloudbreak, the canvas there for big turns for someone like Steph, who's much taller, becomes an advantage for her. But I think at a place like Macaroni's and the conditions we've outlined, the pocket's just tighter. And I think Sally, specifically in her 2014 form, would have an advantage. So I'm gonna split the difference there. I'm gonna go with Sally and give her a world title in 2014.
Yeah, I would. The one thing I'll back you up on that conversation though is that Sally is the most fit person. She would be able to endure that more than probably anyone else. I also think because Macaroni's is a pretty tight lineup, the endurance of getting from point A to Z and back is not so heavy, where Cloudbreak is a big lineup. It's kind of like surfing Sunset Beach. If you surf 7 heats at Sunset in a day, you would be just like, stick a fork in me, I'm done, right? But Macaroni you're not duck diving. It's pretty much just a treadmill back into the lineup. So, but I think all the arguments are good. I think it's a good battle. And I think we can respectfully disagree with the final result.
Well, nothing but respect on that. All right. So on that topic, the men's final is as 2014, Gabriel Medina, no Brazilian male ever won the world title, or no Brazilian anything has ever won the world title. No South American male has ever won the world title at this point. Up against, for you, an also titleless John Florence, and for me, an 11-time world champion in Kelly Slater. Best 2 out of 3 macaronings. How's it go?
I think it's a fireworks, man. I just think it's for all surf fans. I think this is what they want to see. I mean, this is it. 2 out of 3. I just know how much of a beast Gabriel is. He's one of the most polarizing people in our sport, but he is an absolute beast, and that's why we love it. I think he beats John. That's my final. I think he gets John at Macaroni's. I think that the wave Macaroni's offers something to a goofy foot that it does a little bit different to a regular foot, where regular foots can be somewhat, you can get into a rhythm and it's real easy, but it's hard to sort of break that rhythm. where I think Gabriel can surf way out of the box there. I mean, he can literally I think he used it as a skate ramp, and he just flies around the entire time and does crazy stuff. So I think it will be the most entertaining 3 heats, but I think he gets the win.
What's the order? Who wins which heats?
I think he wins the first and last, and John sneaks one in the center. That's how I think.
I like it. I too am giving it to Gabriel. But I'll say this, like, so Kelly's having the same challenge that Sally would, right? For me anyway, because he's already surfed 3 times. He surfed against Michelle, John, and Mick just to get to this final against Gabriel. I do think that Gabriel, at that part of his career, pre-world title, he's still very young. I think he's 20 at this point. I think he comes into the lineup cold. I think Kelly wins the first heat. And I think everyone starts freaking out that, like, Vader's back. He's going to win his 12th world title. Watch this. And then Gabriel is just going to catch fire and, like, really wax him in the second 2 heats. And we're all just going to be, like, jaws on the ground and going, like, holy crap, how did this kid beat Kelly? Like, when Kelly had the jump on him. But I'm totally with you. I think that him on his forehand at a place like Macaroni's is maybe unbeatable. I mean, unbeatable in 2014. Like, and now, like, I don't know how you beat him.
No, I also think, I like what you said about the sequencing. One of the things that I've noticed about Gabriel, and I think our fans have noticed, that he is the most cutthroat competitor I've ever seen, and he's unshakable. And so I think he enters the water with such a focus that my concern is less about how, whether he wins or loses, or if he just blitzes and if he wins straight up, just because I don't see, he's not the guy to leave. I think of, he loves soccer. He's obviously very good friends with Neymar and them. And I think of the Brazil national team up 5-0 or something, and they're still trying to score. Gabriel is that guy. Like, he is not going to give an inch. He can be comboing whoever surfer and still sitting 1 inch from them and making sure that they don't get a wave. I don't know if we've ever seen anybody quite as competitive. Kelly's obviously competitive, but more in the mindset, where Gabriel is physically competitive from the very get-go.
Totally. And I mean, he made an impact from the time he made it onto the tour, right? He made it on at the mid-year rotation in 2011, and he won 2 out of 5 events in France and San Francisco. And I think he was 18, 17 maybe. Like, he was just a kid. He still is just a kid. But 2014 was such a breakout year for him. He won the first event in that, like, controversial final against Joel Parkinson, when there was a big sort of uproar over Joel surfing the wave from kind of behind the rock and getting barreled and surfing all the way down the point, and Gabriel kind of picking up the meteor waves and hammering them on his backhand, kind of like three quarters of the wave, right? So he won that to set the tone for the year. He won, like, in amazing conditions in Fiji and Tahiti, both forehand waves. So his confidence was so high already. And then he ended up winning the world title that year at Pipe, and then going back out and facing Julian Wilson in the final. Julian won the final, but he finished second at Pipe. So again, I think just on his forehand, and I think everything you said about him psychologically, talent-wise, and physically as a competitor, like, he's just so unshakable. And I think we had started to realize that in 2014, but it was such a huge year anyway for kind of global surfing, with the first South American male and the first Brazilian to win the world title. Like, it was such a huge shift that really cemented the Brazilian Storm's arrival on the global surfing scene. And I honestly think, like, we still don't appreciate how impactful that was, but 2014 was such a major year in a lot of ways for surfing.
Yeah. I mean, I love these conversations, Dave, because I just, as surf fans, it really opens up, it brings us back to those times, but it also makes us sort of relitigate, and with the added importance of a wave and conditions, what that final would be like, because it ultimately we're taking everybody's strengths and weaknesses and sort of boiling it into a moment that sort of culminates everything from the year, which and from the time, because we're also going back and looking. I think the place where you and I saw things a little bit different in this iteration was where Kelly was potentially going. Right? Is this his time to say, hey, fuck you, this is my run through? Or am I respectfully just kind of like, I'm here, but I'm going to bow. I'm not in the same place I had been the 11 times before. I think, it's really interesting. I wish this would have happened. I wish this actually happened. I wish this moment happened where we could be like, holy crap, did you see this? Because it's exciting as we go and ponder what would have happened.
It's going to happen. It'll start happening next year. And as soon as it does, I guess the time machine's over. But until then, we get to do these and it's super fun. So we still have time. So we'll do a few more of these. But thanks for that, Pat. That was super fun.
Thanks, Dave.
Before we go today, we've got our fan mail. We got a bunch of questions that came through. So we're going to take those back and forth and we'll close it out.
Do you like that? Well, if so, subscribe over there and then watch more videos over there. And then tell us your favorite videos down there. It's a 3-step process. Do them all now.